That was Janae. Hey, Mr. DJ. Suffice it to say that when our community becomes aware of something and starts making noise about it, it changes. You don't have to look much further than Ahmaud Arbery. Initially, there were reports that differed from what the actual facts were, but those facts would have never come to light had the community not risen up and decided to make it an issue. You can look over and over again. You could look at not only Ahmaud Arbery, but you could look at what happened to the young man in Botham Jean. You could look at even George Floyd. You could look at Breonna Taylor. Things happen in our communities that society seems to be determined to let go, and it is only our action through social media and making people aware that brings these situations to a head, that bring them to light. Which brings me to the curious case of a young woman, Lauren Smith Fields, I believe from Connecticut. She goes on a date with a white guy, ends up dead. Police don't notify him. And the apartment complex, I believe, that she lived in, notified the family. The curious case of Brenda Lee Rawls, also a young black woman, goes on a date with a white guy, ends up dead. The police don't notify him. It still is an issue. The latest case, Christian Obumseli, was a young kid, well-to-do kid, very educated kid. He's dating a white woman, comes up stabbed to death in the apartment, and no one being brought to account. The reason I connect these stories together is because the silence from the community is deafening. Deafening. And I believe, and I hope this not to be true, it is because of who they were with at the time, who they were dating. Because you got a black girl who disappears at the hands or under nefarious circumstances, who's under suspicious circumstances with a white guy. Nobody says anything. Another black girl goes out with a white guy. She ends up dead. Nobody says anything. Christian Obumseli is particularly troublesome because of some of the things he said in his Twitter feed when he was 16 years old, make people indifferent. But the only way we survive as a community is to make sure that they know we're looking. When we say Black Lives Matter, they can just not matter if we like what they're doing, or if we like who they're dating, or if we like what they said before. If black lives are supposed to matter, they're supposed to matter all the time, regardless of who they were with, or the things that they said, or the circumstance they find themselves. Christian Obumseli was stabbed to death. The young white woman who was his girlfriend is covered in blood, petting a dog, and she isn't in jail or even under suspicion. And the reason that can happen is because the silence from us is deafening. Deafening. And yes, I know he said some troublesome things at 16 years old. I get that he had a preference for white women. I get that he said some really horrible things. But the death penalty is not necessary for those things. And the only reason they can get away with these things is because we don't. Because we don't say anything. I watch his mother, and I watch his brother, and I watch their sisters. The same thing with Ms. Lauren Fields and Brenda Lee Rawls. I've watched family entreat them. And you know what I see in those families? People that look just like us. They live their families just like we do. And they're coming to us hoping that we will take up the cause and at least breathe these things to light and make people aware of these things. They should at least get a hashtag regardless of the circumstances. You know what happens when a black person is killed generally? Like, say, for instance, by a police officer. Well, he was no angel. Or he was selling cigarettes at the time. Or he was selling weed at the time. What they do is they besmirch their character to the extent that we're not invested in them. That's a worthless life. That you can look the other way. And by our silence, we are saying similar things. By our silence, we're saying this is okay. That is our tacit agreement. You don't have to yes to affirm it. You can be just as silent. When it is, and I've watched on my social media feed. I tend not to read comments a lot, but some of the things I've heard people say about all three of these cases seem so callous. I can't believe that these are some of the people who would call themselves Christians or people that are concerned about the community. What Obumseli particularly said was very troublesome. I don't like it. But you know what? I don't think he should have been cut to ribbons in his apartment with no one being brought to account for it. And the only thing we have is us. And if we are going to look at people's circumstances and decide that they have no value because we don't like what they did, then we don't have to worry anymore. We don't have to work hard anymore. They don't need to work hard anymore because they've already told us how to act. If your empathy only extends to people that you can relate to or like, then you don't really have any. Those people deserve justice, regardless of the circumstances of their death. I've watched people defend child molesters and people that drug people or rapists or murderers. But someone's tweet denies them your grace. Someone who someone is with at the time denies you your empathy, your humanity. The only reason people care when black people die is because black people make it a point to make sure they care. There would be no Breonna Taylor without you. Ahmaud Arbery family wouldn't have justice without you. George Floyd's family wouldn't have justice without you. But we cannot look at people and not like the circumstances or be unpleased with what we've seen them say and do, and then decide we're not going to invest in it. Because that's what society does. We don't need for us to not care. We already have a society that's ripe with it. That's a little note from the GED section. We got a jazz report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.